Okay, can I welcome everybody here today? For those of you who don't know me, my name's Anna Livingston and I'm a partly retired GP who's been hanging out in this borough as a student onwards since the 1970s, during which the profile of substance misuse has perhaps changed and drinking, but it continues to be an issue, which is why we all are here today. So welcome everybody. The first thing I'd like to do is introduce the members of the team who are here already and the people we're working with. So starting with Tariq.
Hello, hi, I'm the coordinator here for Presets.
And I'm Chris Lay, I'm Network Director and I am managing the programme at the moment.
Ruth Walters, I'm the Director of Quality and Assurance for the Care Group.
Nicola Hagdrup is here. She's a GP from Jubilee Street and she's bringing her person to fit this ghost at about 2:30. Useful discussions. The way we're structuring the day is we're starting with three sort of topics as a plenary together to get you up to speed on the service. We're then dividing into two workshops, which you will see is supporting people's health recovery around the annual health checks. And that's really designed to cover everything from how you organise it, how you work together with your clients to get them to value health in recovery, and what the reception and administrative sides of it are, from recall and recall to actually working with people with your knowledge of them and getting them on board. And then, so that's a discussion, and Nicola Hagdrup at Tariq will be leading that with Matt will be in that workshop from Reset. And then the second one is similarly multidisciplinary and not just dealing with the clinical, and there's going to be Pam, Menzies Banton, me, and there isn't a separate care coordinator there, and it's upstairs. So the workshop A will be downstairs and workshop B will be in room 6. What we want you to do is split up your practices and your professionals so that so it's about approximately the same size, and each make sure that people are going to both of them so that you can report back to one another the useful lessons. And then after a little bit of report back of any points that have come up from the workshop, we're going to have, that's what this is, there are lots of people sitting there. We're going to have a panel to whom you can fire questions and who may want to say things. So it's quite a packed day. And if you haven't, I think you're going to receive email copies of quite a lot of the materials that are present here. We are now at the end of our first year. There have been many hiccups. When you start something, whatever it is, you think it's just going to happen like that. Like you'll have a baby, it won't hurt, it'll smile, it'll feed right away, no problem with the tits, it'll just be happy, it'll grow, it'll speak yesterday. But really it's not like that. So there have been lots of hiccups and everybody's been working really hard on it. And we feel there has been a lot of progress, and you'll hear about that today and what you might be able to do together to provide a better service and to get paid for it, because this is a well-funded service in an atmosphere of cuts. So I just wondered whether anybody had any burning questions that they felt that they'd come today to address. Otherwise we'll bring them out of the workshop and later. But are there any burning points that you felt you really needed to, that you wanted to ask about? I take that as that we're going to be so stimulating that you can't bear to give your own thoughts yet, in case we've stimulated some new ones and you've had your turn. So now we will move on to Chris and Ruth feeding back on the first year.
So welcome everyone. Ruth and myself, we're just going to give a bit of an overview of where we've got to with this programme. As Anna alluded to, we are nearly a year gone now on our programme. So we're going to give some feedback on the first year, and then we're going to sort of give some hints as to how we can really progress this. And we need to progress quite quickly as well, so that we can sort of catch up with where we should be. Who are our patients? So we've got 1,004 patients who are on the National Drug Treatment Monitoring System. And those are the people that you are now getting in the form of lists from Tariq on a monthly basis, who are coming on or off your system, and you should be putting them on your EMIS database. I think for the first time in primary care, we're actually making those connections and making sure that those particularly vulnerable people, their record is going across secondary and into our care systems as well. So that's really important. So 643 of those patients are on heroin or other opiates. And we should say throughout the day, let's just lay this one down here, Health E1 and our colleagues, they've got a separate contract with the borough, so they're not included within this, but of course they're part of our primary care families, so we welcome them as well. So let's have a look at some of the really good things we've achieved. And first and foremost, the work that Anna and Nicola and Ruth have done around competency. So we had a count, and we think 127 Tower Hamlets GPs and other clinical staff and non-clinical staff have done the RCGP drugs misuse Part 1 certificate, which is brilliant. We are a very well trained group of people, and so we're in a good position to deliver. 39 of them have done that in this year, in the first part of the year, and 2 GPs have become accredited trainers for that course, which again is part of our sort of philosophy to try and make sure that we breed the next generation of clinicians to take up the mantle, really. On the alcohol side, 58 Tower Hamlets clinicians have done the management course RCGP, and 36 of them, we've really upscaled people now, 36 of them did this in this current year. And over 50 people have been involved in PLTs, the launch that we had here about 9 months ago, and practice visits, etc. So it's a really good start on our competencies, so that's brilliant. Just a quick outline of what we are looking to deliver. And there's been a bit of confusion really along the way, because we've got a contract with Desley and her team, and they have particular KPIs. And what we've devised, perhaps the first time in this sort of NIS world that we live in, we've devised some targets which we think will drive the targets for Desley to collect as such. So something like the health check and plan, which we've got a breakout group to really explore a bit later, something like that encompasses quite a lot of the targets around blood pressures, or about making sure that women have cervical smear, around spirometry, or peak flow. Those are all part of one process which we're paying you good bucks to deliver for us, and that will drive 3 or 4 of the targets that Desley and the team have set. ECGs and then the alcohol work as well, really, really important. And we've tried to put a sort of subsystem in place so that you have the support and we have the support from you as practices. So things such as each practice having a preset clinical lead, who's our link with you, so that we can communicate with you, is really important. We've got in the system, we're looking for a locality lead from each of the 4 localities, so that we can work quite closely together on how we develop the service, and we have those links directly with GP practices. So soon that advert will come out, and we really would like you to think about who might be a really good clinical lead for your locality. And then we put incentives like this initial data loading for the first year to make sure that your patients are on EMIS, the ones from the ADTMS lists. So quickly moving on. We're not going to do much on alcohol today. Quite a lot of our work is going to be about drug work, although obviously the health checks are about drugs and alcohol. So the people who are eligible for the health checks and the goal setting are the ones on the NTTMS who are also drug and alcohol workers. But we just wanted to put this slide up because we wanted to make sure that everyone knows that we must keep doing the audit C. We should be pushing people on to do full audit, and then reset are really keen for us to get to give referrals for people who are 20 plus when you do the audit.
I understand that you should refer if you feel referral is appropriate, but the 20 plus people must be referred.
Yeah.
But there are many people who may have major
good point.
alcohol problems who don't score that high. So that's not the entry criterion, that's the absolute.
Exactly, but we do expect them to be referred if they're 20 plus. Desley and the team have commissioned a new service, which is the Don't Bottle It Up campaign, which is about self-referral as well, isn't it? And you've done quite well with that, Desley?
Yeah, we've had quite a few hits, so that's been, I think it's the third month now, but that's an online identification and brief advice tool.
So if people are saying, oh, I don't want to do that, or I'm really not, I don't think I've got a problem or whatever, you might be able to sort of refer them to do a little bit of work at home to go on that system. So moving on, one of the issues we've had, and I thought the burning question that might come from the floor would be, what happens when we get a list from you with patients who we don't know because they've never been registered with us in our practice, or they've left our practice. And so Ruth is going to go through the system that we've got in place now around recording, investigating and analysing of incidents, because we treat that as actually a data breach, that we shouldn't really have patients that are not registered with GP practices coming through our way. But obviously on the more serious issues, Datex is going to be the key. So I'll hand over to Ruth.
Thank you. Right, so as Chris said, one of the things we wanted to look at was a system for looking at the substance misuse contract as a whole and actually collating some of the events that happen around that or don't happen around that are near misses, that we could actually work as a borough to actually putting in place processes, procedures, communication channels that would mean we could avoid incidents happening in the future. Datex, so who's heard of Datex? Maybe a few people who've been in.
Your hands up really high.
So quite a number of people. It is a system that's used widely in the acute sector, and some of it actually is set up with the quite acute focus. So we do have occasional challenges in making it fit, but we can change the system in a lot of ways. So if people do think this isn't working, feed back to me because it is useful. We can see if we can tailor the system. The system is only available if you're on the N3 gateway. So if you go home and think, that's happened today, I'm going to go on Google Datex, you won't get anywhere. You have to be on one of your practice computers or accessing via the secure N3 network in order to get onto it. But once you're on that network, you do not need a login to get onto this. And all of your practices should have received an information sheet that gives you the link. So in the electronic form, obviously you can just click straight onto the link, or on paper form you can type it in. So if you don't know where that is, or you don't think your practice has received one, again, Tariq will be able to send that out to you again. Once you get in, it doesn't take that long, because that's the other thing we wanted to be sure was that actually people felt that they could do this quite quickly, get things recorded, and get somebody looking at what we can do to prevent them happening again, or to what we can do to resolve the issue you've got at that time. So once you go into it, I thought and say this will probably be clearer on your slides rather than looking at it on a screen where the writing's quite small. But it comes up as one page and you can scroll down using the bar on the right hand side. Very similar to our EMIS templates. If it's got a star beside it, you have to put something in that box. It won't let you save it without. And just to go through, so you go to the top box where it says service, and you'll see there's actually something that you can pick from the picking list of substance misuse. These are all those kind of smart templates, so once you put that in, it'll give you different options than if you say put in there out of hours service or patient experience. They would give you different options to pick. So once you go to that, it'll give you the option of putting in the centre that you're at. They should all be there. We haven't had any missing as yet, and there's probably I've just thought about that as maybe one I need to remove as well, so I'll update that. But once you go through those, you'll see it puts them in. The reason for putting in these kind of identifiers is so that we can feed back. Okay, so it is important to put in there where the incident happened. Then there's 2 text boxes, which are the big ones you can see there. These are just free text, so similarly to thinking about using EMIS, whatever you put in there is just free text. It's not coded, we can't search for it in any way, but it's just really a brief description. So for instance, the things that we've received so far have usually been around these incidences where the data coming through from Reset has been for patients who are either not registered at the practice or maybe left the practice some time ago. So you just need to record in there. What you mustn't put in there is any patient identifiable information. And it does say do not on the left hand side, but it's not very big and people forget about that. And it's really important not to do that in that box, because that's part of our, when we do reports around what incidents have happened, we use those boxes to actually perform part of those reports, and that might be going to Desley on a contract review meeting and she doesn't need that information. There is actually a place further on to do that, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. The next bit down that you've got to put in, it'll ask you if it's a safeguarding concern. So obviously that's a clinical discussion around in the practice whether or not this is around safeguarding for adults. The next box is around results, and this is where people find these forms really quite confusing, and they are a little bit more focused around the acute sector. So it'll ask you whether it's harm sustained or a near miss, or whether actually there's no injury, harm or adverse outcome. So basically if something has happened but you've managed to rescue the situation, that the person hasn't come to any harm or injury, then you can put that in as the one with no injury. If you've actually picked up that something nearly got given out to the wrong patient or to the wrong prescription issued or something like that, but you've managed to stop it before it happened, that becomes your near miss. And I said earlier that actually near misses where I think we have the real value from this. If we have 10 near misses across the borough, might only be one in your practice and one in another network's practice, you're never going to pick those up as patterns of things that happen. Whereas pulling this data together as a borough means we've got the opportunity to look at that and think there's something not right, there's something not happening when we're emailing ELFT or something, that we can actually put in place a different system and actually stop the incidents happening in the first place. So
Particular question about that's relevant to this group, because they're slightly more likely to throw things, damage windows and so
yes.
on. So would we put in there if adverse things have happened, for example, to the premises?
Yes, so I think that's a really good point actually. This isn't just about any errors that are made or things that happen between ourselves and community pharmacy or anything like that. This could be about the behaviour of a patient, it could be about an incident that happens where you've had abuse of staff or, as you say, damage to the practice as well. And it's important. And one of the things I was going to say actually is that there's a little bit further on I was saying about the person who has been involved in the incident. It's really important to go through and put in that information with as much accuracy as you can. So the patient's name, NHS number if you've got it. Because actually if we have an incident that happens here and then the person moves to a different network or a different practice and then we have an incident there and then we have it there, this system will link those people together. So that means that we can actually identify patterns of behaviour amongst people rather than just around our staff. As well, it would also give us information if we have 10 medication incidents and it all relates to one person making that prescription, it enables us to link that as well. So it's important to put in that information, and that's the next slide actually, but it's got, you see where it's got were there any witnesses, was there an employee involved in the incident, and then information about the person affected. And whenever you click on those, it will just bring up the drop down, but they're fairly self-explanatory. It just asks you for the information in plain English. What I did just want to touch on is the severity, and people get a little bit concerned about what the severity is here, because actually we tend to think of something quite severe as maybe someone having sustained a bruise on their arm, etc. Actually the definition of severe is and I did bring it with me just so I could be very accurate here. So severe is permanent or long-time harm. So the examples that are often given are losing a limb or something along those sort of lines. So actually, although it might feel like this is quite significant for us, it's worth just making sure that you have a quick look. The National Patient Safety Agency, or the NRLS is now, has those categories. But one of the really useful things I found was actually a document that said, so what they term as low levels of harm in sort of our world would be somebody who's being treated with warfarin, who has got a high INR and they've got some bruising as a result of it. If it was the same person and they had actually had bleeding problems and been admitted to hospital, that would come under moderate. And if they'd actually had a severe brain bleed and had permanent and long-term damage, that was their severe. So it kind of just gives you a flavour of what sort of levels of harm they're talking about there. But don't worry, if you're not sure what to put, you can put in according to your sort of judgment at the time, and you can always amend these later or contact us and we can make a discussion around whether or not that needs to be changed. Okay, go on to the next one. Sorry. So the next one was around contact details. As I said, if you click on any of those links to say that there was a witness, it'll bring you up with another box to add those details in. It was just to show you those, really. And then the final one is about the person reporting the incident. Now, the reason this is really important is because what we do is every time an incident is closed, so we've investigated it and closed off, or if we have any queries about it, if we don't have your email address there, your NHSnet email address, obviously, then we can't email you to ask for information or to tell you what's happened about it. Now, I think one of the big things about the system is that actually getting that information back to say, thanks for reporting this, it's really helpful, we've done this in response to it, or we've managed to resolve the issue that you were having, whatever it was, is really important. So do please fill that in. You can submit it without. So one of the things about the system is that you don't have to put that email address in. We ask for a name on here, but actually you can put Mickey Mouse and still submit this. And that was seen as quite important because if somebody does feel there's something they need to report, but they really feel strongly about the fact they can't be identified, then they can still report on the system. But we would ask, where possible, that people are obviously giving us that contact information. And then the last bit was just to say that at the bottom, the incident handler. So we've put in there, you'll see where you click down on the box, it'll bring you up with a huge long list of names, and you can shortcut this by putting in substance, and that will pick up Tariq's name on the system, who's in there as our substance misuse coordinator. Whenever you file this, it also sends an email to myself and two other people in the care group when it just has the basic information. So obviously if something comes through that's really serious that needs immediate action, there are people within the care group who will immediately get notified, but most of the time it's something that can wait till someone's next in the office, or we know that Tariq's handling it and we'll pick it up with them later. So that was really all I wanted to say about Datix. I think, the other thing we had discussed about was community pharmacy. So we are hoping that the community pharmacists will be able to start using this as well. So again, we'll be able to really pull everything together that's happening around the whole care pathway for these patients, and make sure that that's all tied up together. So we'll be following that up with them. I think Joe was going to try it for us, wasn't he? So.
You're going to mention resets parallel systems.
Yes. So ELF use Datix as well. Unfortunately, at the moment, when you have a Datix system, you can't have inter-organisational incidents. It gets put on both systems in effect, because both, or if it involves a patient that's under the care of both services. Datix are looking at this, so we're hoping in future we'll be able to say this is a shared incident between two organisations. What happens at the moment is that we do have strong links with the governance teams in both ELF and Barts Health. So where there's an incident that goes across both organisations, which 99% of the time things affect, they're not usually sitting in one system or another, they're usually things that are happening because of incidents across, then we will have discussions around how we manage that between ourselves. and the data breach is a really good example of that. So where we've been able to pull all that data together that practices have fed back to us, where they've had those lists that are not correct for their practice, we've been able to work with ELF around a much better system for that information to come through and to make sure that the information is accurate and we don't get incorrect lists coming through. So I think, you know, it just goes, it's kind of evidence at the moment of just a admin process, which is to do with data, but actually if we can start employing this and using it for incidents that are happening in terms of the clinical world, it shows what we could actually do in terms of improving things, I think. Okay, thank you.
Just going to have a quick look at our health checks and also our OST work. The first thing I should say is that in working with the borough on setting targets for this, the borough realised that the work that we're trying to do here is all about health improvement. So instead of saying, oh, we'd like you to do 35% of your population, your eligible cohort, do health checks, they said, let's use the first year and set some baseline. Okay? We've talked about some of the issues we've had around data and around systems and trying to get everything going and getting dashboards from CEG and various other things. This is where we're at the end of Q1. Quite disappointingly, I would say, of the 480 people on the system, on EMIS for this group, we've done 44 care plans and goal setting processes. Now, that will have improved because I think in the last month we've got going and we've still got a bit of a month to go before we actually have to sit with Desley and say, right, here's our baseline, what should we do about this? The idea was that we would set a 5% increase next year, and that, you know, that was a very generous sort of development process. We might change that, but let's see where we are. This 44 plays 480, that's actually £40,000 worth of resources that practices are not getting. And so I put that as a stark message to you that this is good for your patients, our patients, and it's not bad actually in terms of the £100 each process that you put together. And some of that can be about health care assistants, nurses, or GPs. We think that the GP should do the final goal setting because they will have the best relationship. So I put that out there, not to be, you know, anything about it. I'm just saying that, you know, it's money that actually we want to give to practices. This is all about making this whole contract work. So that's where we are, that's where we were Q1. And I realise also, I have a couple of clinicians in my network who are saying, oh, what I'm doing is I'm doing it piecemeal, Chris. I'm doing a little bit on one consultation, and then when they come for their OST the next time I'm doing a bit more, and by the end of it, they will have an annual care plan. That's one way of doing it, and that won't show up on these records, and maybe we're being disingenuous by saying, oh, look, it's not that great at the moment. But for those of you who haven't started the process, we've tried to give some support materials on your table. You will have had this. These are the elements of the health plan, the jigsaw that we've put together here. Do all that, tick the template, do the goal setting, and that releases the resource for us. So we've got a similar thing, just moving on, Terry, with our OST work as well. Now, Anna put this through to us this morning and said, oh yeah, if you'd like to just share your thoughts on this.
Yeah, this is a slightly different situation here. I've gone back to the returns we've had when there was CDT and ISIS and the old service and so on, and the searches that were done in CEG to look at how many people we were seeing in practices. These figures exclude healthy ones. And how many of them we were claiming for successfully. Now, those of you, up to the end of March, we paid practices according to the old arrangement, which was that people had to, the clinician had to see the person they were prescribing for at least once monthly, and often that was twice monthly. And then because we have a complex series of parts of our template which do point people towards directions of care that are important, from small things like when is the next appointment plan, which is very important if someone hasn't made it or turned up or you're away, would like to know in their plan, to other areas. We wanted to make sure, and this is for the last 20 years, that GPs went into the templates, opened them and then filed them. Nobody would expect you to go down several pages of templates in a consultation when you're focusing on, say, methadone prescribing. But we did expect the template to be used, and that was then coded. So as some of you may be aware, the GPs who have been seeing people over the years have brought money into their practices for attendances on a monthly basis. And so if you look at the pale blue, that is the number of people who, when EMIS has been searched, have had, within the practices excluding Healthy One, a prescription in that 3-month period for, they've had a prescription for methadone or buprenorphine or either or both. So if you look at 15-16 quarter 4, it's somewhere around 460. And there are very few people who didn't have the template opened and coded. Now then we had a situation at the end of 16 where CDT was closed down and reset was opened and people were taken back for reassessment into the service because it was felt it was time to see whether our patients, our clients, are really having the appropriate level of care, whether they might be better to access services directly in reset or be seen in practices or whatever. So that may have been a contributing factor because the decrease in numbers of people in treatment in the borough as a whole are identified as opiate users and treatment. It doesn't go follow this pattern. So in 16-17, when that had happened, you notice that the whole number has gone down, which is probably because some people were only being seen in reset, but there may have been people who also dropped out, we don't know. And it may be to do with, it's a bit late, Cameron had this recovery thing, which was supposed to send people out for treatment, but this is a bit later than that. Cameron did that for you previously. But people were gradually not using the template. And that red bit means that you weren't being paid for the work you did, hence the title. Then when we got to 17-18, quarter 4, which was under the new contract, but because we hadn't yet had the accurate NDTMS data fully entered, we paid on the old contract basis. Again, the numbers had dropped quite substantially, so about 370 people had prescriptions as opposed to 460, and a much higher proportion of them, doctors hadn't opened the template. So that meant, even according to the old thing, practices were losing because people were not using the template and not getting the money. But one of the things that we've always encouraged within the scheme that up to now we haven't been able to monitor was that the only safe way of working was in partnership together with so that it's like one agency is reset and preset, that we're working together, that we should have a sort of seamless partnership between us. And that also means that people that we see in the practice for prescriptions and advice and so on should also be seeing a care coordinator from the reset team, whatever the location, and Pam will deal with that later. So that's why, and those people who have a care coordinator or in some other way in treatment and reset get on this NDTMS register. So that is now the payment criterion, which has been made quite clear. So from the beginning of this financial year, that's the 1st of April, work has only been made eligible for payment if the person has had a prescription in the months with a consultation, they've got coding that they're currently on the National Drug Treatment Monitoring Service register, and the template has been used. Can you go back to the other one, please? No, backwards. That one, yes. So I have not been provided by CEG yet the equivalent figures for the others. I might be able to compare for you when we get the year-end figures, but there's a lot of work for Anna Goodshaws. So if you look, the people who are being paid for now, quarter 1, have suddenly gone down to 40, 150. Now, I want to make clear to all of you who are practitioners, whatever your field of work is in general practice, to Desley from the DAP, to those of you from Reset, that much more work is being done in general practice. But also that there are some people out there who've been lost to general practice. I would suspect that you could just put the green on top of the others and it would be at the bottom end, and that only half the work is now being paid. So if you are not a clinician, tell your clinicians. If you are a prescribing clinician, tell yourself. You must code and use the template, or you will lose 35 quid a month. And we upped the money, which is the first rise in 15 years, at the time, no, 10 years, in 15 years actually, in the time that wages have been flat. So we upped the money, and what are people doing less work? So money doesn't always, they're not doing less work, they're doing free work. Now we know we're not a charitable institution, we know how difficult it is to keep general practices and health services together. So people need to be responsible about that, because this is the work that's, that we need in the district, and they need to have the money for it. And the other thing is that some people have generously been seeing people in their practices over years who used to maybe go to Reset, or who came back and said, it's too far, or I'm at work, or I really, you know me well, doc, and have really refused and bullied the practitioners into seeing them on a practice level, because any responsible clinician will worry about somebody who's a chaotic drug user and whether they can treat them. But we feel we're now offering collectively a great support to a service that you're all delivering, and that everyone, it's very important, and this is not new, but now we can monitoring it through NDTMS. Everyone who's getting a prescription should have a care coordinator from Reset that they're involved in. This might not be a fortnightly visit, it might be once a month, but that the working is in partnership and we work together.